Subscribe to Family Reddit Chronicles. Now, let's begin. Austin Fisher had learned early in his career that silence can speak louder than shouting. He spent 12 years as an investigative journalist before moving into documentary filmmaking, and over that time he became skilled at reading what people did not say. The pauses, the guarded looks, the details hidden in plain sight. Yet nothing prepared him for the silence that had settled inside his own marriage. "We have to go, Austin." Laura stood in the bedroom doorway with her arms crossed, a defensive stance he had come to recognize over the last 3 years. "It's Christmas. They're my parents." Austin looked up from his laptop where he was reviewing footage for his latest project, a documentary on institutional abuse in youth programs. The irony was not lost on him. "Your father called Maya chunky at Thanksgiving. She barely ate for a week afterward." "He was joking," Laura replied, though her voice lacked certainty. "She's 10 years old. Laura, my mother already set a place for us. If we don't show up, she'll what?" Austin asked, standing and closing the laptop. "Be disappointed? Make passive-aggressive comments for 6 months?" He softened his tone and reached for her hand. "Your parents know how to make you feel guilty for setting boundaries." Laura pulled away. "You don't get it. You grew up with normal parents who actually liked each other. My family is complicated." Austin's parents died in a car accident when he was 25, leaving him with warm memories and a deep respect for genuine affection. The Cummings family was the opposite in nearly every way: wealthy where his had been modest, cold where his had been warm, and performative where his had been sincere. Norman Cummings had built a fortune in commercial real estate, strip malls and shopping centers across 3 states. He wore his success like armor, constantly reminding others how dependent they were on him. His wife, Gladys, had spent 38 years perfecting the art of looking away, her fixed smile as permanent as her makeup. "Daddy, I don't want to go." 7-year-old Ethan appeared in the doorway, his Spider-Man pajamas loose on his small frame. "Grandpa's mean." Austin knelt and pulled him into a hug. "What did Grandpa do, buddy?" Ethan glanced at his mother, then back at Austin. "Nothing, he just makes me nervous." Laura sighed, the sound heavy with resignation. "See, even the kids know we can't skip it. Come on, Austin, it's one dinner, a few hours. Then tomorrow we'll have our own Christmas at home." Austin studied her face, seeing the exhaustion of someone who had spent a lifetime managing her father's temper and her mother's denial. They had been together 14 years, married for 12, and each visit to her parents' estate had grown more strained. "Fine," he said, ruffling Ethan's hair, "but the second someone crosses a line—" "No one will cross the line," Laura said, quickly, too quickly. "It'll be fine." 3 hours later, Austin drove their SUV through the iron gates of the Cummings estate, a sprawling colonial mansion in one of Connecticut's wealthiest suburbs. Laura's brother Philip's BMW was already parked in the circular driveway, alongside his wife Sylvia's Mercedes. "Uncle Philip!" Maya ran ahead, her dark curls bouncing. At 10, she still had an openness that Ethan was already beginning to lose. Philip lifted her and spun her in a practiced show of affection that felt hollow to Austin. "That's my favorite niece. You've grown another foot." "I'm your only niece," Maya laughed. Philip Cummings was everything his father valued: ambitious, aggressive in business, and willing to sacrifice almost anything for success. At 42, he ran the Western Division of Cummings Properties, expanding the empire while Norman held on to the core holdings. His wife, Sylvia, taught art history at Yale, a fact Gladys mentioned at every opportunity as proof of the family's refinement. Norman appeared at the top of the front steps, a crystal glass of scotch already in hand despite it being mid-afternoon. At 71, he was still imposing, 6 feet tall, silver hair swept back, his face hardened by years of cruelty rather than kindness.
"About time," he called. "Thought you got lost. Oh wait, you can't afford a decent navigation system." Austin felt Laura stiffen beside him. They lived comfortably on his documentary work and her job as a pediatric nurse, but to Norman, anything short of excess was failure. "Merry Christmas, Norman," Austin said evenly, years of dealing with hostile interview subjects serving him well. "It's Mr. Cummings, or better yet, Sir. Philip calls me Sir." "Philip also calls you Dad," Austin replied calmly. "Since I'm not your son, I'll stick with Norman." A vein pulsed in Norman's temple, but Gladys appeared in the doorway, perfectly timed after decades of practice. Come in. Dinner's almost ready." "Laura dear, you look thin. Are you eating enough?" The house smelled of pine and expensive candles. Every surface was decorated with professionally designed holiday displays. A massive tree dominated the foyer, its ornaments carefully curated antiques, nothing like the handmade decorations Austin remembered from childhood. In the formal living room, Maya gravitated toward Sylvia, who showed her photos from a recent trip to Florence. Ethan stayed close to Austin, gripping his hand. "Can I get you boys a drink?" asked Philip, handing Austin a beer and Ethan a juice box. "Dad's serving his special scotch tonight, 25-year Macallan. Probably costs more than your monthly mortgage." "Probably," Austin replied, refusing to engage. Norman settled into his leather armchair like a king surveying his domain. "Philip, tell Austin about the Henderson deal. Show him what real success looks like." As Philip launched into a self-congratulatory story about buying a failing property and pushing out 50 small businesses, Austin noticed Gladys watching Ethan with an expression that mixed concern and calculation. "Ethan, sweetheart, will you help Grammy in the kitchen?" she asked, extending her hand. Ethan looked up at Austin, who nodded. "Go ahead, buddy." As Ethan crossed the room, suddenly Norman stuck out his foot. Ethan stumbled, catching himself on the coffee table. The adults looked away. Only Austin and Maya noticed. "Careful, boy," Norman said sharply. "Clumsy, just like your father." Austin started to stand, but Laura's hand gripped his arm. "Don't," she whispered. "Please, it was an accident." But Austin had seen Norman's face in that brief moment. The intent, the satisfaction. Years of interviewing abusers had taught him to recognize patterns. Norman Cummings was not just a difficult father-in-law, he was something far worse. Dinner was announced, and they moved to the formal dining room, where a table built for 20 held settings for 8. Norman took the head, Gladys the foot, Philip and Sylvia on one side, Austin's family on the other. The meal followed a familiar script, Norman criticizing the wine, Gladys hovering over plates, Sylvia making polite conversation. Maya excitedly talked about her school's production of A Christmas Carol. Ethan barely touched his food. Then Norman turned to Austin. "Still making those little films? When are you getting a real job?" "I just finished a documentary picked up by Netflix. It comes out in March." "Netflix," Norman scoffed. "Everyone has something on Netflix. What is it, more of your liberal agenda?" "It's about abuse in youth detention centers, systemic failures that allow children to be harmed by people meant to protect them." The table went quiet. Laura shot him a warning look. "Sounds depressing," Sylvia said. "Who wants to watch that?" "People who care about protecting children," Austin replied. "People who believe abusers should be held accountable." Norman's jaw tightened. "You see villains everywhere," Norman said. "The world isn't as simple as you make it in your documentaries." "You're right," Austin said. "Most abusers don't see themselves as villains. They justify their behavior. They hide behind authority and loyalty." "Daddy," Maya interrupted, trying to ease the tension. "Can I tell everyone about the play?" But Norman wasn't finished. "You think you're clever with your cameras, but you don't know anything about building a legacy. You're a parasite living off other people's stories." "Norman, please," Gladys said softly. "It's Christmas." At that moment, Ethan reached for his water glass. His hand trembled and a glass tipped, spilling water across the white tablecloth. The room froze. Norman's chair scraped back violently. He crossed the room in seconds and grabbed Ethan's arm with visible force. Austin moved, but not fast enough. Norman twisted Ethan's arm and a sickening crack filled the room. Ethan screamed, then fell silent as Norman slapped him hard across the face. "That's for spilling water," Norman said coldly. No one reacted. Laura reached for the potatoes with shaking hands. Philippe refilled his wine. Sylvia stared at her plate. Gladys dabbed at the spill as if nothing had happened. Ethan cried quietly, cradling his arm. Austin's vision blurred with rage as he started to rise. And then Maya stood up. "Grandpa," she said, her voice calm and steady, "should I tell them what you did last night when you came to our house?" The room went completely silent. Norman's face drained of color, then flushed a deep red. "Maya, sit down." "Should I tell them where you put your hands?" Maya continued, her voice unwavering. "What you said I had to keep secret?" "Maya!" Gladys snapped, her composure finally cracking. But Maya's eyes were fixed on her grandmother. "You knew, didn't you, Grammy? You were there. You saw him come into my room." Laura stood so abruptly that her chair toppled backward. "What are you talking about?" Austin was already moving, lifting Ethan into his arms.
His mind raced as his heart focused on one thing, protecting his children. "She's lying," Norman said, but his authority was gone, replaced by desperation. "She's confused." "I'm not confused," Maya said, her hands clenched at her sides. "You came to our house last night after Mom and Dad were asleep. You said Grammy sent you to drop off presents. You came into my room and touched my—" "We're leaving," Austin said sharply, cutting through the chaos. Holding Ethan close, he turned to Laura. "Get the car keys, now." Laura stood frozen, torn between disbelief and horror. "Laura," Austin repeated, his voice firm. "Now." Philippe had gone pale. Sylvia was crying openly. Gladys sat rigid, her carefully maintained calm revealing something cold beneath. "You can't just leave in the middle of dinner," Norman protested, backing toward the wall. "This is my house." "Your house," Austin replied quietly, his voice controlled and dangerous. "We'll see how long that lasts." He reached to the door with Ethan in his arms and Maya pressed against his side. Laura finally moved, grabbing her purse with shaking hands. "If you walk out that door," Norman began. "Shut up, Dad," Laura said, her voice breaking. "Just shut up." In the car, Austin drove one-handed through the dark roads, carefully checking Ethan's arm. Maya sat in the back, her composure finally giving way as her body shook. "I'm sorry, Dottie, I should have told you. Grammy said she'd be sad and Mom would be angry." "You have nothing to apologize for," Austin said, his voice thick with emotion. "None of this is your fault." Laura stared out the window, tears silently streaming down her face. At the emergency room, Austin carried Ethan inside while Laura guided Maya. The admitting nurse took one look at Ethan's swollen arm and the red handprint on his face and immediately called for a doctor. "How did this happen?" the nurse asked, her trained eyes assessing the situation. "His grandfather," Austin said steadily. "He twisted his arm until it broke, then slapped him, about 40 minutes ago." The nurse's expression shifted. "We'll need to file a report with Child Protective Services. I'll file one with the police myself, but there's more. My daughter needs to be examined." The nurse understood instantly. "I'll call Dr. Harrison. She handles pediatric assault cases." The next few hours passed in a blur. X-rays, careful questions, and detailed documentation. Ethan's arm was fractured but clean. It would heal with a cost. The slap had left bruising along his jaw, photographed for evidence. Maya's examination took longer. Dr. Harrison later explained she found evidence of inappropriate contact but no penetration. Everything was documented thoroughly. "Your daughter was very brave," Dr. Harrison said quietly. "She gave a clear account. Based on what I've seen, this may have been a first incident or an early escalation. Abusers often test boundaries." "You think he's done this before?" Austin asked. "I think that's very possible," she replied. "Men like this usually have a pattern." Detective Sylvia Schwartz arrived shortly after, listening without interruption. "We'll bring both children in tomorrow for formal statements," she said. "I'm getting a warrant tonight." "What about his wife?" Laura asked hollowly. "We'll speak with her as well," the detective said. "If she enabled this, she'll face consequences." After midnight, they returned home. Both children slept in the master bedroom, kept close. In the kitchen, Laura finally collapsed into tears. Austin held her as she sobbed, grief for her children, for the family she thought she had, and for the father she had wanted to believe in. "I should have known," she whispered. "You wanted to believe he was better," Austin said gently. Then his voice hardened. "This ends now. I'm going to make him pay." The next morning, Austin woke to messages. Norman and Gladys were in custody. Evidence had been found. Philip texted, warning that this would destroy the family. Austin ignored it. He began digging. Public records, lawsuits, settlements. By noon, he found multiple cases quietly settled, including one involving a minor. Laura stared at the documents in shock. "My mother signed these. She knew." Detective Schwartz called again. Photos had been found. Dozens of them. Children. Some relatives. Some taken secretly. Spanning decades. Austin sat in silence after the call. This was bigger than he imagined. "We're going to expose everything," he said quietly. "Every victim deserves to be heard." Over the next 2 weeks, Austin worked relentlessly, often 18 hours a day. He contacted families connected to the old settlements, many of whom had been silenced by strict non-disclosure agreements. He searched newspaper archives, uncovering brief mentions of incidents at Cummings properties that had been quietly dismissed. Former employees came forward, describing abrupt terminations and unexplained departures. Piece by piece, a clear pattern emerged, behavior that stretched back to Norman's early 30s. What took shape was not a single crime, but decades of calculated abuse. The photographs found in the safe dated back to the 1980s. Some of the girls were now middle-aged women who had spent their lives trying to bury what had been done to them. Austin contacted each one personally. Some could not speak. The trauma was too close. Others were ready. They had been waiting for someone to ask the right questions and to believe them. By the third week, 15 women agreed to go on record. Their accounts were strikingly consistent. Norman had used wealth, authority, and family access to reach children, then relied on fear, money, and influence to keep them silent. Some were daughters of employees who lost their jobs after complaining. Others were distant relatives labeled as troublemakers. One was a babysitter assaulted at 16, later paid for her silence with college tuition. Detective Schwartz's criminal investigation ran alongside Austin's work. Over coffee one afternoon, she was direct. Even with this evidence, a conviction isn't guaranteed. His lawyers will argue the photos are innocent, the settlement's practical. Given his age, he may get minimal time. That's not enough, Austin said. No, she agreed. But it may be all the court can deliver. Austin thought about the limits of the legal system and the different power of public truth. He thought about the women who had trusted him and about Maya, who would live with this experience forever. He knew what came next. For the next month, Austin filmed non-stop. He interviewed the 15 women, letting them tell their stories in their own words. Medical experts explained the long-term effects of childhood sexual abuse. Legal analysts broke down how wealth and influence protect predators. Austin documented Norman's business empire, showing how the same aggression that built it also enabled abuse. He included his own family story, Ethan's broken arm, Maya's testimony, Laura's painful realization about her parents. With consent, he used hospital photos, police reports, and documented evidence. The film was titled The House That Norman Built. Philip tried to stop him. He called repeatedly, warning about the family name, the business, Laura's inheritance. Austin did not respond. Sylvia reached out with quiet concern. She believed the victims, she said, but questioned whether public exposure was necessary. It is, Austin replied. The legal case might punish him. This ensures he's remembered for who he really was. The documentary premiered at Sundance in January, 8 weeks after that Christmas dinner. It won the top documentary award. Netflix acquired it 2 days later. When it was released in March, the impact was immediate. Norman Cummings became a national symbol of unchecked power and systemic abuse. His real estate empire collapsed within weeks. Partners withdrew, tenants broke leases, investors walked away. The Cummings name, once associated with success, became linked to exploitation. Norman was convicted on multiple charges and sentenced to 25 years. At his age, it was effectively a life sentence. Gladys pleaded guilty as an accessory and received 5 years. Philip attempted to save the business, but the damage was irreversible. Cummings Properties declared bankruptcy. The estate was seized and sold. Everything Norman built was dismantled. But Austin was not finished. 1 year after that Christmas dinner, he released a follow-up short documentary. This time, the focus was on recovery. Survivors spoke about rebuilding their lives. Maya, now 11, talked about therapy and advocating for other children. Several women had become counselors and activists themselves. The message was clear. Norman Cummings had tried to silence people with money, fear, and shame. It did not work. In the final scene of the follow-up documentary, Austin sat in his living room with Maya and Ethan. Ethan's cast was long gone, though a faint scar remained on his jaw, a permanent reminder that Austin had turned into a lesson about standing up to bullies and protecting those who cannot protect themselves. "Do you think Grandpa is sorry?" Maya asked, looking directly into the camera. Austin considered the question carefully. "I think he's sorry he was caught, sorry he lost his money and his reputation, but if he had another chance, he'd probably just hide it better." "That's sad," Maya said. "It is," Austin replied, "but remember this. His choices don't define you. They don't define any of his victims. You get to write your own stories. The documentary closed with text on screen. Norman Cummings died in prison on November 15th at age 72. His estate was liquidated, and the proceeds were distributed among his victims. Gladys Cummings was released on parole after serving 18 months and now lives alone, estranged from her family. Philip Cummings left the real estate industry and works as a consultant. He declined to participate in the film. At the second premiere, Laura sat beside Austin, holding his hand. Their marriage had been tested by guilt, grief, and the strain of helping two traumatized children heal, but they had endured. "I never thanked you," she said quietly as the credits rolled. "For what?" Austin asked. "For being the kind of father who protects his children," she said, "the kind of husband who fights for his family. My father was supposed to be that man. You showed me what that really means." Austin kissed her forehead. "Our kids will grow up knowing that silence protects abusers. Speaking up protects people." Later that night, after the interviews and congratulations, Austin sat in his home office reviewing footage for his next project. His phone buzzed with a message from Detective Schwartz. "Two more women came forward today, inspired by the documentary. Both are filing civil suits against the estate. Your work is still making a difference." Austin allowed himself a brief smile. Norman Cummings had spent his life building monuments to himself, businesses, wealth, a legacy he thought would last. Instead, his true legacy became the courage of the people he tried to silence and the justice that finally reached him. Down the hall, Maya read quietly under a nightlight. Ethan slept soundly, his arm fully healed, his nightmares fading with therapy. They would carry scars from what had happened, but they would also carry certainty that their father had protected them, fought for them, and refused to let the truth be buried. As Austin closed his laptop and headed to bed, he understood that this, above all else, was the legacy worth leaving. This is where the story ends. Share your thoughts in the comments. If you found this story meaningful, subscribe to the channel, click the video on screen, and we'll see you next time.